Welcome back to Inside City Hall. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, public housing officials and advocates were in Albany today calling on lawmakers to fund rental assistance for tenants. During the pandemic, many New Yorkers were able to pay their rent with the help of the Federal Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP for short, but state lawmakers opted to limit that funding to private landlords. The Public Housing Authority says that it desperately needs its back rent, and the collection of rent has in fact dropped from 90% pre-pandemic to just 65% today. Although legislators have earmarked funds for public housing tenants left out of the federal program, advocates say it's not nearly enough to cover the $466 million estimated back rent tab that the authority would like to collect. Joining me now to talk about that and much more is Lisa Bova-Hiatt. She currently serves as the Interim CEO of the New York City Public Housing Authority. Welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Let me start with that question, the back rent. It's close to $500 million as of the last time that I looked at it. What is the plan to collect it? And is there a standing order not to evict any tenants for non-payment of rent?
Well, currently we have 73,000 tenants who owe rent, most of which accumulated during the time of the COVID period, right? March of 2020 through today. And they were effectively cut out of the ERAP program because our state legislature deprioritized subsidized housing. We're the only state in the country that did that. So now we have a very serious problem. NYCHA, as you know, has a $40 billion capital needs repair, and the rent that we collect is a third of our operating budget. So what we've done over the past 2 years is what anyone would do. We've gone to our savings. But now we're almost out of savings. A public housing authority of our size should have 3 to 4 months of reserves. We have less than a month. And so what that means is we need the state legislature and the governor to step in and provide the money that should have gone to our tenants, not only NYCHA residents, but public housing tenants across the state. Currently, we are not evicting anyone who has filed for ERAP protection and ERAP funds. And as a public housing authority, our goal is to keep people housed. And during the pandemic, I was general counsel before I was the interim CEO. And one of the things that we did as part of our transformation plan was really look at the way we handled evictions. And during that time, we discontinued over 30,000 cases and said that we really wanted to focus on people who had the largest amount of rent arrears for the longest amount of time. I want all of our tenants to stay in NYCHA. We house 1 in 16 New Yorkers. 20% of NYCHA's employees are also NYCHA residents. MTA workers, people who work for the city of New York. So we're such a part of the fabric of New York City. We want to make sure that they stay housed.
But you can't be, as an attorney, you know this, you can't be the only landlord in New York who doesn't insist that the rent gets paid, right? I mean, and certainly even those who are public employees, including your employees, certainly those people can be held to account and make sure that they don't fall behind, right?
Sure, but I think in fairness to our residents, they were waiting for ERAP money the same way their neighbors and friends were who didn't live in subsidized housing. The difference also is that the average income of one of my residents is $24,000. Right now, they have built up arrears. The average amount of arrears is over $6,000. So if I know that I'm eventually going to be evicted, why would I ever start paying rent?
Well, I mean, but this is the slippery slope that you're sliding down, right? Where people get out of the habit of paying rent. They start to realize that, you know, maybe there'll be a fix out of Washington or out of Albany. Let me just pocket the money or use my funds elsewhere. And then it'll be very hard to get back up to that 80, 95% payment rate.
Well, so I'm hopeful that if we are afforded the the ERAP money that we believe that our tenants are entitled to, we're basically resetting the clock. And the reality is during the pandemic, it was not just a health crisis, it was an economic crisis. And our tenants, even though they live in subsidized housing, everyone had increased expenses. So I think they were just doing what every other New Yorker was doing, which was paying for eggs at
Sure.
$9 a dozen.
When you overpaying for eggs, exactly. When you were up in Albany today, what are you hearing? My understanding is that there's at least one bill that's been proposed that would cover close to $400 million of these back rent payments.
So this morning was magical. We had 300 of our tenants. We had great presentation by both the Senate and the Assembly, really saying that they are going to make sure that their voices are heard and the needs of NYCHA are put first.
Okay, that's not the same as saying they're going to give you $466 million, but
I'm forever hopeful.
It's in the right ballpark. Let me ask you, while I have you, the status of the NYCHA Public Housing Preservation Trust. This is the new public entity. The mayor is in support of it. It's supposed to enable you to issue bonds and borrow money and get on with a lot of the repairs. The last I looked, the 9-member board had not been appointed, and I think that you, even as an interim CEO, get to name 4 members to that board. Is that right?
Absolutely. So since the trust passed in the summer, we've been doing a lot behind the scenes. We're standing up a brand new organization. As you know, we had a very robust engagement process for the voting rules during the fall. They were issued in the middle of December. And right now we're putting the finishing touches, getting people vetted for the board. And then after that happens, we will move ahead with announcing the first properties that are going to be entitled to a vote, which is so exciting because it's really the first time in NYCHA's history, actually in most public housing authorities' history, where the residents get to choose what path they're going down.
Okay, we'll look forward to that and the appointment of the board members and the creation of the new organization. I saw earlier this month you told members of the city council at a hearing that NYCHA has suspended 70 projects around the city, including fix-ups of playgrounds and things like that. Is that a fiscal problem? Is that a logistical issue?
It's absolutely a fiscal problem. It's very, very hard to project manage a million capital projects, and we have so many of them going on currently. Right now, we are, as we've done since 2019, prioritized all of our pillar areas. So because we're in the middle of a fiscal crisis, because we have so much, such a high amount of rent arrears, we're focusing on the pillar areas.
So when it comes to what tenants will be voting on, some will vote to join the Public Housing Preservation Trust. There's still an opportunity to vote for the RAD program. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
I had a question about that. By going to RAD, where you have a private manager take responsibility for a particular development and sort of get things moving, including the collecting of rent and so forth. If tenants have a complaint about how that private manager is doing things, what is their recourse? Do they come to NYCHA? Do they complain to the company? Do you fire the company? What goes on there?
So they go to the company, but they can always reach out to NYCHA as well. Once a property, the management of a particular property is transferred to one of our PACT partners, we are, because we're still the landlord, we're the owner of the land, we are very, very involved to make sure that repairs are being done, the enhancements are being done, and of course that they are being treated with the respect that they deserve.
Okay, people have some big choices ahead of them, including the legislature, which needs to help solve this problem, and the tenants who have to pick a path forward. Thanks so much for coming by today.
Thank you so much for having me.